morcego desse tamanho não, ué.
Aí também não existe sereia.
Que coisa preta é essa?
Eu acho que...
All hail the Geek Legion of Doom!
Hail the Geek Legion!
Of Doom! High five!
Yeah!
We are talking the Brazilian 2013 movie Negro, also known as Dark Sea, also known as Black Sea, also known as Bloodbath, and that's certainly probably the most apt title. I would say this is kind of like the Brazilian equivalent of Peter Jackson's Bad Taste. So the movie kind of sounds like it's going to be an aquatic horror film. We have two fishermen out on the seas, and they get a strange catch. It's almost like a merman, for lack of a better word. And they think it's dead, but it isn't, and ends up biting one of the fishermen. And there seems to be some infected sea life with some type of pathogen or infection at the very least, but it's actually potentially demonic. So the movie focuses on this small sort of coastal village off the coast of Brazil, and it's kind of somewhat kooky inhabitants, as they are basically turned into zombies, is the best way I would describe it. So it kind of starts off like it's going to be an aquatic horror movie, but ends up being, for the most part, a kind of a zombie movie, but a very chaotic, yucky, slimy zombie movie with some interesting things going on. Okay, let's discuss what works in this movie's favour. I pretty much guarantee this is the only movie where you're going to see a zombie humpback whale realised practically. So there's that. So, like I said, if you like the early works of Peter Jackson, Bad Taste, Brain Dead, Dead or Alive as it's called elsewhere, it's kind of like that. It really feels like it. More so than, say, I think maybe a comparison you might see with this, it might be Evil Dead, but it's more along the lines of that sort of chaotic and the style of Peter Jackson, certainly his early films. No Lord of the Rings here. So it's very entertaining in many ways, certainly on a visual spectacle, and the movie ends up with the bulk of the action being in this kind of nightclub or cabaret, where we have a collection of different denizens from this area, and it ends up being attacked by kind of zombies, and it is the most chaotic, slime-filled, bloody, gory bloodbath, to actually use one of its titles, that I think I remember seeing in recent years. It's pure chaos on screen, but it's quite fun, certainly somewhat gross. And one of the things that reminds me of the sort of the Peter Jackson early works is the sort of the somewhat grubby characters that you have in this film. I mean, everyone is like dirty and sweaty and living in sort of like somewhat squalid kind of homes and things like this. There, for example, at the cabaret, there's like three women who are like cooking for all the guests, and it's just like one of them's got like a cigarette, and it's just like there's no health and safety. Let me just put it like that. So it's all sort of gross, and even the characters before they're zombies are sort of like somewhat grubby, shall we say? And that reminds me of that sort of Bad Taste sort of Peter Jackson aesthetic. And then we have the effects, which are kind of all practically realised. 2013 movie, and they must have got so messy making this film. Everyone is covered in goo, blood, green goo, black goo, like bits of kind of like lumps everywhere. Everyone is absolutely covered, and the effects are very, very in the kind of like the gross department. So if you like pure chaotic grossness, then this is going to be for you. But I would say I think the effects are relatively solid. And they're kind of done with a, I mean, they're quite sort of disgusting, but they are sort of tongue-in-cheek at the same time. Again, I'll point to Peter Jackson's sort of stuff. So again, if that sounds good to you, then I would certainly kind of check it out. And really, you have a very long extended sequence once the kind of the club scene gets going. You know, it really is a very long extended sequence. I'd say the second half of this movie is practically all zombie chaos kind of going on. And as I say, as the film kind of heads towards its conclusion, we get a zombie whale, we get zombie seagulls, we get the devil kind of turn up, along with a variety of different kind of like undead and stuff like this. And no one's really safe in this movie, I have to say. You know, we even get children becoming zombies and stuff. So, you know, it really does feel very, very sort of chaotic. And I quite like the kind of the setup, I have to say. Even though it doesn't really have anything to do with sea creatures and stuff. It's a little bit unclear about what's going on, I have to say. And we'll come on to that again. But I'd still quite like this kind of the dark sea, you know, and this kind of merman sort of situation. You think it's going to be like a Leviathan sort of style film initially. I think the characters are kind of quite interesting. They're somewhat over the top. Very sort of like almost cartoonish sort of characters to a degree. But I think for a film like this, I think that in a way that it kind of benefits from that. And yeah, it's just, I mean, there's a bit of a lag between our initial attack and then the kind of like when the zombie attacks in the club scene. But once that starts, it never stops. So it's pretty much full on at that point. What doesn't work, there's no real kind of central character in this movie. You think it's going to be this like albino guy, but then he disappears for like a large portion of the movie. Probably like the second act of the movie. He's not even in it. And then it doesn't really have much to do outside of that. So it doesn't really have a central character. I think, as I've kind of alluded to, the movie has a very chaotic feel. And on one hand, it's quite fun. But on the other hand, you have no idea sometimes what you're actually looking at. Because it's just chaotic on screen. And it's like a variety of quick edits, like close-ups and things like this. Kind of quite low light. It's all sort of taking place over this one night, and then inside this kind of cabaret club, it's always quite dimly lit, so you can never really kind of see what exactly is going on for the most part. So it's sometimes kind of quite hard to track what's actually happening. And then we have, as I said, there's no real central protagonist, but we have a kind of degree of sort of characters that we're introduced to, and then everyone ends up kind of covered in blood, and it's really hard to see who is who, because obviously they all look kind of Brazilian and they're all covered in goop, so it's like who are these people? You don't really know who you're looking at any one point. So it really feels, not that it's a complicated story, it's not, I don't mean it's hard to follow like that, but you're not quite sure what you're looking at. I would say this story is a little muddled, because at first you think it's going to be some type of creatures from the deep, but then it's like, it has this element of Satanism or devil worship that ends up, but you're never really sure how that kind of relates to the sea creatures and what's actually kind of going on. And it's like, I guess it's something to do with it, but you don't really know why or how things have ended up like that. It never really kind of goes into any detail. And I think the lack of a true sort of central protagonist, again, it kind of makes you, I mean, again, you look at I'll compare, this is really where this difference is between the Peter Jackson movies, is they had quite clear central protagonists, whereas this doesn't. And as such, you don't really have a character that you can kind of genuinely get involved with. So I think the movie, visually speaking, is worth watching if you like gory spectacle. But it's a little rough around the edges, let's call it that. But it's certainly a fun movie. I will give this a 6 out of 10. It doesn't quite hit the kind of the classic levels of what we've talked about, but it's still a fun movie overall. And if you like goofy splatter, then this one is worth your time. 6 out of 10. What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.